Good evening. I'd like to call the November 12th, 2019 regular council meeting to order, please. Roll call.
Mayor Wright.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Krupa.
Here.
Councilmember Percival.
Here.
And for the record, Councilmember Myers is absent.
Move to,
Move to excuse. Second.
Cecil. And that's approved 4-0. Go on to the invocation. If you'd stand, please. Be given by Interfaith Council Brian Hawkins, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilmember Krupa.
Amen. Let us bow our heads. Dear gracious Father, we thank you for this opportunity to come out tonight on the behalf of the city of Hemet. Lord, we pray right now for each and every leader that is here representing our city and our community. We pray, Lord, for understanding and wisdom and guidance as we continue, Lord, to govern this city. We thank you for each and every business leader and every participant and every community person, every law enforcement represented here. We pray for their households and their home for safety tonight. And Lord, we just ask that a special blessing be over this meeting as everything is done according to your will and your purpose. And we just praise your name. Amen.
Please join me in the salute to our flag. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll go on to item number 4, City Attorney Closed Session Report.
Mayor, the council had several items on its closed session tonight. Item number 1 was a conference with labor negotiators. You did have a meeting with your labor negotiator and discussed the collective bargaining groups that are listed. There was no reportable action on that item. Items 2 and 3, the council decided to hold over until either a special meeting or its next regular meeting when it has a full council. We're missing Councilmember Meyer today. Also, the City Council added, at the City Attorney's request, an item of subsequent need. It was one additional item of conference with legal counsel on existing litigation, the case being the City of Hemet versus Dow Chemical Co. et al. That item arose subsequent to the preparation of the agenda and required need for action before your next meeting. Council voted 4-0 unanimously to add that item. You did have a briefing from special counsel on that case, but there was no reportable action on that item. That concludes my report tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we go on to item number 5, communications from the public. Anyone who wishes to speak during the public comment or on a particular item will be required to fill out a speaker slip and provide it to the city clerk. Each request will cover one speaker. Those who wish to speak must submit their own request and be called on by the mayor. There's a 3-minute per person time limit for all comments, including public or quasi-judicial hearings. Written comments on any item may be submitted to the city clerk to be included in the meeting record. It will not be read aloud by the city clerk. All who wish to speak, including council members and staff, need to be recognized. Members of the public shall comply with the adopted rules of decorum, Resolution 4545, and we have a copy of those rules that can be requested through the city clerk's office. Please turn off or mute your cell phones during the meeting is in session. And city clerk, do we have any requests to speak?
Yes, Mayor, we have 3. We have the first one, Sonia Ramos, and then we'll have Bob Dystermars, and we'll have Judith McPherson.
Okay.
In that order.
Sonia?
Good evening, Council. I am Sonia, the founder of Boxing for Christ. I wanted to come and notify the public of, we always get so negative here in this valley, but I wanted to share something positive. We have one of our students that has been with Boxing for Christ for over a year that has now made it to the Olympic trials. We need to get him to Louisiana. I'm going to have him speak and introduce himself and what he has accomplished.
Thank you.
Hi.
And your name?
I'm David Navarro.
David?
David Navarro. And just to give you a little bit of information, I've been boxing since I was 5 years old. And my dream was always to make it to the Olympics. So here I am now. And I came a long way. I'm a multinational champion. And so far, I have over 150 fights and 7 losses. I've come a long way, and right now I just need the support from the Valley and a little bit more background. I'm 19 years old, and in this sport, it's really hard at a young age to accomplish the Olympic qualifiers. I'm one of the 8 champions in the United States right now to make it. I don't know what to say.
So what we're asking the public is we need to get him to Louisiana by December 7th. We need to raise $4,000 to get his coaches and him to represent the city, $4,000 to represent the city of Hemet. When he wins, because I'm saying when he wins, because he will win, he will be representing us in the Olympics. And for him to accomplish that and to stay away from the gangs and to stay away from the drugs and to accomplish this at an early age, it's amazing. And to do it in the city of Hemet is amazing. So I just wanted to thank you guys for giving us the opportunity, for allowing us to train, because we are in San Jacinto, but we represent the Valley. We have kids from everywhere. So when we go out, we say we're from the Valley. So we just wanted to thank you and ask you guys for your guys' help.
He does live in Bella Vista,
He
correct?
does live in Bella Vista. Yes,
So
he does.
are you having any fundraisers for him?
Well, we're barely going to start it since it just happened. So, we're starting to get the fundraisers going. It's just the first time that this has ever happened. We had the program for 8 years, and we're a small program. We never expected this. So, with him accomplishing that, we really want the Valley to support and show, that there is good things coming out from this Valley.
Would you make sure to let the city know when those fundraisers are?
Yes, I will definitely get that started.
And thank you for coming out tonight and letting us know. And congratulations on what you've been able to accomplish so far.
Thank you.
Bob Dystamars?
Just checking. I'm going to keep the positive beat going. I'm here to offer thanks. We had a group of folks come down from Thailand that Hemet Sunset Rotary partners with to do water projects in Thailand. We had the opportunity to do almost 9 million cubic feet of water storage in our most recent project. They wanted to come and see what the United States does with water. They had the opportunity to visit Western Municipal, Eastern Municipal, and Met. They saw Diamond Valley Lake, and the guys from the government were really impressed at the volume of water that we manage in Southern California. In fact, they were astounded about the volume of water we manage. The folks from the Water Foundation, the people that help us dig the ponds, were most specifically interested in what the city of Hemet does with stormwater. And the reason for that is those ponds are only filled when it rains. And so how water moves and how the city of Hemet moves water around was of extreme interest to them. I want to thank Chris for getting all the approvals, and I want to thank Dan for coming out and showing that delegation exactly how Hemet moves water from pond to pond when it's necessary to empty one and fill one that's not quite as full. They walked away from that experience talking about how they could apply what you're doing to some of the ponds that they set up. They're talking right now about doing more regional ponds instead of local farmer ponds, and using portable pumps and a set piping system to move water from the regional pond to the farmers' ponds and not have to buy expensive pumps that remain still for much of the time. So Dan, you did a great job. You had them right in your hand. They were listening to every word you said. And I think that you're part of something that is going to have an impact in Thailand, but it had its inspiration and genesis right here in Hemet with with your talk and the questions that you answered. So I want to thank you very much, and I hope, yeah, good job. I hope that you still put letters in files and those kinds of things, and I'm going to give that to you. And absolutely. Go Rotary. So we are working on another project, so hopefully you can show us how to do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just real quickly too, Bob, I had occasion to spend a year in Thailand during the Vietnam War, and I saw how water gets moved during the monsoon seasons there. So I'm sure it was very inspirational for them to be here.
Oh, it was. And you know that the farms only plant in the rainy season, and the dry season everybody has to go to Bangkok and other places to get jobs. And so moving water from pond to pond is something that absolutely saves their families. So,
Thanks, Bob. And thanks, Rotary. Judy McPherson.
Hello, my name is Judith McPherson, and I will abide by Resolution 4545. Okay, I will not be stating any names, etc. I noticed on the the October 22nd council agenda, there was a closed session item regarding case USDC CV, or it was 5:18. 02377. You have a packet that you were all given, and that case was filed sometime back in 2018. As of, I believe it was April of 2019, there was a protective order requested by the City of Hemet defendant. This is all from a public document, and that was put in place by the judge. And I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a very inquisitive person, and I'm a taxpayer. I believe if you look at the last page, if there is any kind of a gag order, maybe that is no longer in existence. I think that there's an issue. Now, the case began as a trial by jury, and then it went to ADR Procedure 2, which is Alternate Dispute Resolution Process 2, which was panel mediation. And then as recently as September, it has gone to a private mediation, and I don't know, how that impacts any possible statements or revelation of deposition testimony. So that's all I wanted to say. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Okay, we have no more speakers. We'll go on to presentations. Representative from Susan G. Komen, Foundation of the Inland Empire, will be in attendance to accept the city's fundraising donations, and interim city manager will provide the report and presentation to Susan G. Komen Foundation.
So we have Jill Eaton, Executive Director of Susan G. Komen of the IE, as well as Eileen Hartz, a board member of Susan G. Komen. As you all know, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and so in honor of all those who have been affected by this, the city staff decided to partner with the Susan G. Komen of the IE to raise money for this cause. And so I have to mention that the main drivers of this were our Finance Director, Lorena, as well as Erica, as well as Michelle De La Cruz, who has moved away to Oregon now, as well as some of the executive team members too. I'm looking at Chris, and I know a lot of other departments that participated too. And so some of the things that we did, we allowed employees to wear jeans Thursday if they made a donation to this cause. Erica has some pictures that she's put together that highlight some of the efforts that we did across the board throughout the city. And I do have to add that at least one council member on this dais made multiple purchases and donations to this cause.
And I didn't wear any of them tonight.
In addition, we had Lorena that made some purchases that were obviously also to purchase staff to raise money for this cause as well. Finally, we had a raffle where individuals could purchase tickets to win various prizes that were donated by various individuals throughout the agency. And so we're proud to have raised over $500 by city employees as well as city council members. And we thank them for their commitment and their donations in raising awareness for this cause. And so with that being said, we'd love to have Jill and Eileen go to the podium, and we've got an envelope. I know we don't have anything fancy here. If they would like to say a few words, that'd be great. And then I would love to have the council have a picture taken with everybody here.
Well, I donated, but I would have donated a lot more if Chris would have wore a pink shirt. You will get him a pink shirt. Yeah. Done. We'll have that happen tomorrow.
Well, I'm Jill Eaton. I'm the executive director at Susan G. Komen, and Eileen Hards is one of our board members, and we're thrilled to be here this evening and grateful and appreciative of the city employees and the city's generosity in selecting Susan G. Komen and also getting behind this campaign for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. It's just awesome to see. And so we represent all of Riverside and San Bernardino counties. You know, that small territory, nearly 30,000 miles of land. And we provide programs and services such as breast cancer, funding for breast cancer, screenings, mammograms, diagnostics, treatment, patient navigation, education, psychosupport systems, and programs, and more. Annually, there will be 2,300 women diagnosed with breast cancer that live in our two counties, and we're here to service them. And so it's through the generous donations such as this that we're able to go ahead and get women into screening. We primarily focus on those that are underinsured or uninsured, and there's a lot of women that are in need of help. So the funding will go to great use. We're, again, extremely grateful for this support. Do you want to say a few words?
No, I appreciate your participation in this, and thank you so much, and thank you on behalf of all the women that you will help. So thank you.
Thank you. And we have, you said a picture, and so we have some signs that says, we are more than pink, and because you guys are more than pink, that's our tagline. And so we were hoping to get a picture with you guys hosting the sign so we could put it up on our Facebook page.
We'd love to do that.
Okay. And I'm hoping somebody in the audience can help take the picture. No?
Oh, that was good.
Yeah, it was like, that was correct. Yeah. Shades up. Very cool. They go in order. There's we, are, more.
See the staff that participated?
More. Yeah.
The staff that participated?
Lorena, Kathy.
Come on.
Come on. Guys. Carl. Did you wear pink? Did I mention you wear pink? Thank you so much for your support. Thank you. Thank you for your support. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for being behind the campaign. Thank you so much. Oh, I love it. There you go. Still coming up under the lights. No, you're good. No. At least we're not upside down. That's the shuffle. My goodness is behind this card. There you go.
There we go.
Very good. Thank you, Tony. Okay. Oh, yeah, I accidentally hit the heat light. Yep. Yes, you're right. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you. I am. I'm just trying to. Thank you. That's that. Thank you. Sorry, about to get started. So FYI, really bad spot. Note to self. I know. I just need my time was. Okay, I'll give it. But I'm keeping it text.
Pink shirt. A little bit more if you had socks to that. Okay, moving on to item number 6, receive and file. Are there any items that anyone wishes to pull?
Move approval of.
Wait. Oops. I would like to pull 6C. Oh, good idea.
Okay, now I'll make a motion to approve 6A and 6B.
Second.
Please vote. And that's approved 4-0. Okay, 6C, fiscal year end 2018-19 review. You know that was coming.
So Lorena's making her way to the podium. So what we have today is fiscal year end 18-19 review, as well as the quarterly budget update for the current fiscal year that we are in. There are 2 items that we are asking for from council. The first one is to receive and file the preliminary fiscal year end 2018-2019 report and the fiscal year 2019-2020 quarterly report. And then 2, staff is seeking direction related to the funding for city attorney services for fiscal year 19-20. You will recall that when we went through budget discussions, that the budget was adopted with the 6-month allocation for the city attorney. And so we will be providing that information through this report that Lorena will be providing.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I have for you the preliminary year-end numbers for fiscal year 18-19. The audit fieldwork has been completed by the independent auditors, but the final report has not been issued yet. We expect to see that sometime between December and January. Okay, so for general fund, a lot of good news. The general fund revenues were $42,979,000, up 7% over last year, and over $2 million above the projected revenues for the fiscal year 18-19. Of that, sales tax revenues were up $900,000 over last year, and that's partially due to the delayed payments from the prior fiscal year. But we also did see an increase in sales tax revenue. We also had an increase of nearly $1 million in property taxes, and that does include the vehicle and lube fees. And community development fees, including engineering, all the revenues were up as well. These amounts do not include Measure U. I will report on Measure U in just a bit.
So I want to talk a minute about the property taxes. I'm assuming most everybody got their new property tax bill, and I haven't heard one person say it went down or stayed the same. And so I know for me, it went up considerably. So I guess what I'm asking then too, based on the numbers we saw, what kind of prediction do you, what do you predict for next year? Do you know particularly what percentage the property taxes went up?
I don't. I know they always go up a minimum of 2%. And when HDL was out to talk to us and report to us on property taxes, they advised that we budget flat for 19-20 because they weren't projecting to see increases, not so much because values haven't gone down, but they're not going up nearly as much as they were before. Houses aren't selling as fast as they were before. So they suggested that we budget flat. My hope is that, just like in 1819, that they were too conservative about it.
Okay. Just wanted to get that question in before I forgot it.
On the expenditure side for general fund, our total expenditures were $41,068,000, nearly $1 million below last year's 17-18 expenditures and $1.2 million below the current year budget. And the $1.2 million is on top of the $1 million vacancy savings that we had projected. Those were already built into the numbers, so this is on top of that. Main reasons for this is we did have several vacancies in departments above and beyond what we were projecting with the $1 million. All departments and department heads have continued to do a great job of controlling their costs. And of all of the general fund departments except for the fire department were under budget. But even with that, the general fund overall was under budget for the fiscal year. And we'll talk more about that at the end. I want to get through the numbers and then we'll talk about specifics on that. The only other two departments or funds that were over budget overall citywide were the city attorney and liability funds. And again, we'll discuss that more toward the end, if I may. General fund revenues exceeded expenditures by $2.3 million. That means we met our 20% reserve requirement.
Can you repeat that, please?
General fund revenues exceeded expenditures by $2.3 million. And I have to tell you, when I was preparing this, I used last year's to go from. And I had to switch the words because we had a surplus this year, and I honestly haven't seen that in a little while. So just to recap, in 17-18, our non-reserved available fund balance had been depleted to $20,000. So that's in excess of the 20% set aside, the Measure U fund balance, and any fees like PEG fees that are restricted from use. For this year, 18-19, the general fund's non-reserved available fund balance increased to $1,874,000. Big difference.
Wow.
So the economy's booming.
It's doing good in Hemet, at least. For Measure U, also good news. Measure U revenues were budgeted at $11.2 million. Total revenues received for the year were $11,736,000. And just as a comparison, prior year revenues, so 17-18, $11,096,000. So just like the Bradley Burns sales tax, this sales tax was also delayed, had some delayed payments from last year, but there is still a general growth overall. Expenditures for the police Measure U department were $5,286,000, and expenditures for the fire Measure U were $1,730,000. So when we take what was collected in excess of the expenditures this year and add it to what they've carried over from the prior years, Measure U's reserved fund balance for future use is $11,680,000. And here's just a breakdown of the general fund fund balance. Total fund balance is $23,562,000. $8.2 million is the 20% reserve requirement. $1.7 million is the PEG fees that are required to be set aside for specific use. And then the $11,680,000 for Measure U fund balance, leaving the $1,874,000 available for other expenses. In the non-general fund departments, we also saw good numbers. Development impact fees were collected above the targeted numbers for the year, and this has a lot to do with the increase in community development. So in development in the city, as more homes are built or more buildings are built, we collect more development impact fees, which we can then use to improve our streets, add more streets, or anything of that nature. Gas tax revenue, including the SB1, also increased 8%, higher than the projections, and water and sewer revenues were also up for the year. There are still, with several projects completed or near completion at year end, so we did see some projects being done by engineering, which was great. We did see more expenditures in the non-general fund departments, but that was expected. There are still several projects that were previously approved by council, either through the CIP program or independently through council action, that need to be completed, and those budgets will be rolled to the current year, but the funding for it will be rolled as well. Departments within the internal service funds were under budget, again with the exception of the liability fund and the city attorney fund, and we will go back over that. So that's fiscal year 18-19, and now I have just a small update on 19-20. We're only a quarter of the way through the year. So revenues collected for the general fund is just under 10% of the annual budgeted amount. This is normal for this time of year. If you recall, sales tax revenues are approximately 2 months behind, so we haven't collected very much yet. Same with Measure U. And then property taxes are several months behind. We don't normally see our first payment until January, after the December 10th payments are in to the county, and then in about May or June after the April payments. And that's just a breakdown of our revenue. The majority of revenues collected are sales tax and other taxes and fees at this point. We're not really seeing a lot yet. As property taxes start getting collected, that graph will shift. Departments continue to hold the line on expenditures. Expenditures are on target at 21% for the year, which for the first quarter can be up to 25%. Measure U expenditures are below budget at 15%, mainly due to some big projects that they have budgeted that have not been started yet. And that's the breakdown of our expenditures. The red is the police department, the green is the fire department, and then the smaller pieces above are the other support departments for community development and administration. For the water fund, revenues are on target at 24.6% of projections. Expenditures are a little under that at 22.9%, mainly due to projects that are still in their planning stages, as well as vacancies in the department. On the internal service funds, most of the internal service funds are on track for this point in the budget cycle. The city attorney's fund does need to be reviewed, as it was only budgeted for approximately 6 months. So that concludes my 19-20 review. I want to go back now to talk about those overages in 18-19. And I want to start with the city attorney and liability funds, since we were just talking about that. Both funds were over budget. Both of them have to do with litigation, solely with litigation expenses. So when cases are settled or closed, and we've had expenditures that exceed $250,000, our insurance reimburses the city for anything in excess of those $250,000. We did have a large case close this year. We're working on pulling everything together to submit to our insurance for reimbursement. So we're hoping to recover at least a good part of that money back into those funds, and we do break it down. We put whatever was for the city attorney costs right back into the city attorney fund, and then the balance of it into the liability fund. And the other department is the fire department, and I'm going to turn it over to our city manager, Chris.
So I think this department in particular, and I know the chief's done quite a bit of background on this, I think over the last few years, the overtime in the fire department has trended in the right direction. And what I mean by that is from the peak in about, I think, 2015, we've seen a downward trend in the amount of overtime that we've seen in the fire department. A particular note, we have seen overtime costs decrease over the last 2 years as a result of a couple different items, and those include internal administrative changes, addressing non-discretionary overtime, thanks to Chief Brown, and then as well as recruiting to fill vacancies. Currently, our status is that we've got 5 stations throughout the city, and they currently have 3 folks that are staffed at each station. And so with that being said, we've staffed it at that level 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so whenever someone calls in sick or takes vacation, that obviously impacts our ability to have those folks on staff to be ready to deploy to any sort of emergency that comes up. Chief Brown and I have been talking about that. One of the things that we'll need to continue doing is I should note that in fiscal year 18-19, that was a rollover budget, meaning that the conversations related to what the overtime was going to be or what it was projected to be, number of vacancies, that was a conversation that wasn't had. So for fiscal year 19-20, every single department was at the table with respect to what their expenditures were expected to be and their best guess of what any sort of changes would mean for their operation. So with that being said, we did have some conversations with the fire chief and his management team with respect to what are those changes that would be needed to help allocate resources in a way that is most transparent, but also our best guess as to what we expect to incur over the course of that year. And those conversations were had, and we're continuing to have those conversations moving forward. There are some policy level items that the chief and I have talked about briefly that we're going to be exploring moving forward, that we've included just for the council's sake. We're not seeking any sort of council direction. There are things that are on our radar that we would need to explore to make sure that we're doing our best to make sure that we aren't exposing ourselves to having folks that are working and having them overworked, but also making sure that we're maintaining the operation and moving the city forward with respect to public safety. Some of those items include working with human resources to develop a leave policy program. Currently, overtime costs to backfill for vacation and sick time are approximately $500,000 annually. As I noted, 5 stations resulting in staffing for those respective stations, and having those staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year, means that the chief has to have the staff available to manage the operation. So when people take vacation, the chief needs to be able to plug people in to make sure that the services are ready to be deployed. In addition to that, establishing a policy on the number of consecutive hours fire employees can work. This was underscored in the deployment analysis conducted and presented at the council in 2015. I should note that there is minimum staffing levels that are specified within the MOUs, as well as minimum staffing levels that are left up to management. I'm not advocating for any change in that. I'm just saying that there are costs associated with doing that. I think a lot of people refer to those as the cost of doing business, and that's essentially what we have. In addition to that, increases related to the MOUs directly impact overtime rates. And so those then in turn affect overtime budgets. So those should be adjusted to reflect those increases. Again, I can't reiterate enough that Chief Brown has been at the table with those conversations. We've had those conversations with respect to what we expect future overtime to be. Whenever we're doing this budget, there's a number of assumptions that are included there in that budget. And our best assumption is basically kind of the best information that we have. So it's a constant moving target that we're trying to pinpoint to and make sure that we're providing our best estimate that we can. But obviously, with the conversations we had in fiscal year 1920 as we were developing the budget, those conversations will continue in fiscal year 2020-2021 so that we can best estimate the number of or the expenditures that we anticipate having within all of our departments. You'll also recall that we did a similar exercise for the police department where we allocated overtime more appropriately and allocated budgets or allocated funding to areas that weren't allocated the same amounts in years prior. So I can say that you can expect to have those conversations be ongoing. It doesn't, it's not a good thing when you see a swing of $800,000 in the budget with respect to overtime. That's certainly not what we like to see. However, we're doing our best to try and estimate for the upcoming fiscal year what those numbers will be moving forward. But those are just some of the things that management is committed to reviewing, examining, so that we can button down that number to a more accurate number and provide a budget that is most representative and as accurate as can be as it relates to some of those personnel expenses within the budget. So, thank you.
So before we move on to the recommended action, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation you gave. That was helpful. Okay, with that,
Move approval to receive and file item 6C.
Second.
please vote. And that is approved 4-0.
Okay, so Mayor, if I may, I wanted to go back to recommended action that we want on item number 2. The next update that we will be providing to the council will be the mid-year report that is scheduled to be, we're aiming for January. And so that will have been over the 6-month allocation time for the city attorney's budget. So we're looking for direction on what to do moving forward so that we don't see an overage come mid-year. So we're looking for direction on what the council wishes staff to do. Well, I know that we talked about a few things that you wanted staff to review, and so we'll need that time to review that. Whatever allocation that the council would like to do for the city attorney's budget, whether you want to do it for another 3-month time until we're able to review that, we're happy to do that. We just don't want to run into the situation where we go over budget in a line item without bringing that to the council for direction and clarification on.
Yes.
You had in your report, thank you for that report too, by the way. I think that the numbers are promising. Unfortunately, we're looking at 2 areas of the budget that are over budget, that the money that's above and beyond is going to get eaten up pretty much by this. Your comment about litigation is the biggest driver behind the city attorney's budget. We're going to recover some of those costs that will drive that down once those costs are recovered?
That's correct. And for the record, the city attorney's budget is separated into 2 different sections, one for everything that is covered under the retainer as professional services, and another section just for litigation. The section for retention, for the retainer part where the city attorney's office provides services as needed for council meetings and anything else of that nature, was within budget. What was not within budget was the litigation, and something that unfortunately is not under his control.
Sure. My comment about that is I think that there needs to be a future discussion about the litigation and the amount of litigation that the city has and what we're doing as a risk management standpoint from a policy decision on cutting these costs or curbing these costs or reducing these costs.
Anyone else have any comment?
I think, as was already identified, a lot of these overages are related to litigation. And the comment was made earlier that it's the cost of doing business. We don't have a crystal ball to anticipate when we're going to get sued or for what it might be or for what amount. Many times our public safety departments, they don't have a crystal ball really to tell them when it's going to be necessary to work overtime. And unlike many jobs in the private sector and the public sector as well, public safety doesn't have the luxury of saying, well, we'll just run without that position. If somebody in a clerical role is out sick or on vacation, that work can be shared by other employees and they can catch up when they get back. Public safety, when somebody calls 911, there's an expectation that they're going to get a response and it's going to be timely. So I understand the challenge that represents in trying to corral and contain overtime. But it is indeed a cost of doing business. But I certainly agree with Councilman Percival's comment that we can make some strides in identifying some risk management strategies and policies that might help us in the litigation overages. But I really think that just being cognizant of it and making efforts to make reasonable and prudent policy decisions, we're still at the mercy of the roll of the dice of what comes down the road.
Michael?
I do have one more comment that I wanted to make about just that, and the amount of litigation that the city takes on. And this is something that I think the taxpayers of this community need to realize, is that every time the city gets sued, that is taxpayer dollars that are going out to fight these lawsuits that some may be warranted, but others may not be warranted. And the city is, and when I say the city, I mean all of the residents and all the taxpayers that live in this community are the ones that are footing that bill. So I just wanted to make that clear without getting too specific on some things.
Yeah. So, Linda, did you have anything to say?
No.
Okay. So, needing direction on the city attorney's budget moving forward. So a 90-day extension to that 6-month review?
Would that be enough to get us through the mid-year update?
You tell us what you need.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Litigation is averaging about $200,000 a month. We have enough in the retainer to get us through, I think, most of the year, but not in litigation. We're really, really close to our limit already, if we haven't exceeded it.
So what we can do is take the average amount of litigation, which is about $200,000 a month, which is $600,000, multiply or add the retainer, which gets us to about $700,000 or so for the next 3 months. So
that should be enough to get us through. Yes.
So that'll put us at what will that put us at?
1.4. I think that will get us through to the end of the year.
It'll get us through for three months.
Yes, 3 months, yes.
And then we'll provide another update once we're doing the mid-year update.
Okay, so the recommendation of an additional $700,000 to get us through the 6 month or the additional 3 months should.
That in total will get us through about 9 months, if my math is correct.
Right.
And Council, if I might add, we have two very intensive pieces of litigation going on right now, which are largely fueling these. One of them should be through trial and hopefully resolved during that time period, and after that we can reassess the number. And I do encourage you to have a discussion about the quantity of litigation, the cost of litigation, and alternatives. I'm happy to be part of that.
Okay, so with that, we have a direction for staff to add an additional $700,000 to carry us through 3 months for a total of 9 months. May I have a motion and a motion to accept that? Or approve that? No one
So
wants to
moved.
speak?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
That would be nice to say no.
And that is approved at 3-1.
Thank you, Council.
Next item is consent calendar. Are there any members of the council that wish to pull any of the consent items?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd like to pull items 7B and 7C.
7B and 7C.
Correct.
Exactly the ones I was going to pull. Okay. Anything else?
And 7F, just for some questions.
And 7F. Okay, so a motion to approve, and on 7A, correction in the minutes?
Yes, Mayor, it is in front of you, so
Right.
you can just go ahead and approve those
Okay.
as normal.
All right. So we have item 7A, 7D, 7E. And that's it
I'll
for
move to
approval.
approve those 3 items.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that is approved 4-0. So item number 7C.
Yeah, okay. I just, 7B.
Oh, 7B, excuse me.
I just have one question on this, and I think it's phenomenal that we're getting 100,000 from OTS. But I guess the question is why we normally don't get this sizable grant from them, do we?
Actually, excuse me. Actually, last year, I believe the amount was like $132,000, so it dropped just a little bit, which.
That's mainly because of the DUI accidents that we have, or what?
So is what OTS does is they use kind of a formula. It's how many accidents we have, our traffic index compared to our enforcement efforts, and then they throw in fatal traffic accidents. So then they give us a ranking, and as you can see by the report, we have quite a few, fatal traffic accidents a year. We have a lot of pedestrian accidents each year. So it's a competitive grant, so it's good that we qualify for it. But on the other hand, it would also be nice for them to say, well, you have no traffic problems, so you don't get a traffic grant. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. But it's $100,000 this year for the 1920 year. We will definitely use that for extra. I can give you a little history. In the past, Office of Traffic Safety has allowed us to purchase things like, motorcycles, and we actually, back in the 90s, we paid for positions. So we actually had traffic officers that were being paid for by OTS. They've really moved away from that. We've been lucky to sneak in a few purchases in the last few years, some of our new radar trailers and things like that we use for enforcement, a DUI trailer that we use. But generally, they like us to stick with what we call like an overtime enforcement. So we'll post a 2-officer overtime car a couple nights a week, and they'll go out, and that's what they will be doing. Then we code their overtime to the grant specifically. So right now, OTS is really focused on overtime enforcement. I think it's just easier for them to keep track of and handle it that way.
Okay. Well, good job in applying for and getting that sizable amount.
Thank you.
Yeah, great job. What I wanted to ask about, the funding we received before, is that what funded our partnership with CHP that one year where we partnered with them to do our traffic?
We may have used some of it for that, but I don't believe that was the sole funding source. I would have to go back and look and find out exactly what we paid for, but that was a chunk of change. It was over $200,000.
But it worked. Did it?
Yeah, I think so.
It worked.
People slow down when they see more officers on the street, yeah.
That's right. Okay, Mike?
To touch on that, since they're doing all this construction on Florida Avenue, is the CHP out there more now to help with that?
We haven't seen that. I don't know if, as part of their construction project management, if they have a CHP officer assigned to that detail. It's generally part of their process. We could always call them and ask them if they can do that. I have a feeling traffic on Florida Avenue is so busy that after they start construction in our real busy parts of town, the Caltrans workers are actually going to say, hey, we need this protection.
With that, I've noticed that people are starting to figure out how the lines and all that are working from day one was chaotic.
Right.
But with this money, and it's, like you said, it's nice to have this, but it would be nicer if we had fewer accidents and traffic-related issues. You probably don't know the stats right off the top of your head, but I know that it seems like there's an excessive number of collisions at Stetson and Kirby, Seven Hills.
Mhm.
Is there, my request to you, Chief, is if we can get some of this extra enforcement over in that area.
Slow those old people down.
Well, not just the old people.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think it's a Stetson is a very high speed.
It's high speed, but it's a thoroughfare to get people from the east end of town out of town.
But most definitely we can focus on that. And they really do, our traffic folks really try to focus on our hotspot areas, we call them. So of course, Florida Avenue is really where, because most of our traffic is there, but Stetson is another one of our highly traveled streets, same with Sanderson. So yeah, so we will definitely be focusing those efforts on that. And our traffic sergeant who put this together, Sergeant Reinbold, is super at making sure that our deployment works with what we have. I mean, we spend,
He does a great job.
yeah, I mean, we spend a tremendous amount of time at just around our schools, and we have 13 schools that we rotate through, and that takes a lot of time in the morning and the afternoon. But yes, we will definitely be focused on our high incident areas.
Chief, how many motors do we have now?
We have 2 full-time motors. Dan, the sergeant, can ride, and we have another officer that we just assigned to traffic, but he has not been to motor school just yet. But that's the plan. So we'll have 4 that can completely ride every day if they want to.
Well, I don't know, there's a time that I sit, because I come out of Seven Hills, that I sit that I don't see every time somebody going through the red light.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So.
And they'll do it right in front of us too. So. And it's a very expensive ticket. So, and I know everyone, we hear it a lot. Well, if we would just write tickets, we could make so much money. But the reality is that the portion of the citation fees that we get back to the city is minuscule. Most of it goes to things like DNA testing, courthouse construction, things like that most of the public is unaware of, that we actually voted in and added onto our own fees for tickets. Also, when judges reduce the fine, they typically reduce the city's portion, and because the other is legislative and we can't touch that.
Yes?
Yeah, and I know you know this, but I think it's worth mentioning for the public benefit is the whole function of enforcement is strategic. You look at your collisions and you look at the primary collision factors, what violations were causing those, and you direct your enforcement resources accordingly. And so I'm hoping that even though a lot of the focus in this grant was DUI related, I'm hoping that we can make some reasonable expenditures of those funds and incorporate some real strategic enforcement.
Sure. And the reason it's so DUI focused is because our fatals are generally DUIs.
Right.
There have been a significant amount of them lately.
I think in this year for this grant we had 18 incidents with 20 fatalities. It's too many.
Not a good picture.
No. Okay, with that,
More people
if I can
dying
have a
in car
motion,
crashes.
if you don't have anything more to add or ask, okay?
Make a motion to approve item 7B? 7B.
Second. Second?
Michael second.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Michael.
I beat you to it.
Okay. And don't hit okay.
There we go.
And that's approved 4-0.
And item 7C,